Boker Tov, everyone. Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Temple Emeth and to our final event of our Collaborative Scholar in Residence weekend. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Rabbi Louis J. Siegel Sanctuary in Teaneck, New Jersey. We've reached the final event of our Scholar in Residence weekend with Temple Sinai and Congregation Adas Amuno. I hope you agree that it is wonderful to gather for opportunities such as this, and I'd like to welcome those joining us on live stream today. In case you didn't hear the announcement before the cameras went on, I invite you to take a moment right now to silence your cell phones, as we want today's lecture and the music that's going to go with it to be uninterrupted. I will also take a moment to say that if you enjoyed this Scholar in Residence program, you are invited back to Temple Emeth on April 17th through 19th for our biennial Rabbi Louis J. Siegel Scholar in Residence weekend. At that time, we will welcome biblical scholar Dr. Gary Rensburg of Rutgers University. Flyers for this event can be found in the hallway. Before I introduce our guest for the final time, I would like to recognize the Temple Emeth folks who made this morning's program possible. I'd like to begin with members of our Israel Artsa Committee, chaired by Stephanie Stokes. It was their idea to bring Rabbi Golan to us originally, and the idea expanded to encompass an entire weekend with 3 congregations. The committee arranged for our bagel breakfast, served as greeters today, and helped fund the cost of the program. Thank you also to the Adult Education Committee, chaired by Linda Postganzer, who offered a financial cushion as well. And I want to offer words of appreciation to our office staff and our custodial staff. Finally, I'd like to thank the volunteers in the live stream control room. Pauline Hecht and Rachel Eastman are at the controls today. So in just a moment, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for the last time. Not the full introduction, because you've probably heard that twice already. But what I will say is that Rabbi Golan has spoken a couple times about supporting Reform congregations in Israel, becoming an overseas member. He also spoke yesterday at Torah Study about his annual Jewish trip of both Israelis and diaspora Jews to Tbilisi, Georgia, which intrigued a lot of people, including me, and interested a lot of people to go, not including me. But if you are one of those people who is actually interested to go to Tbilisi with Rabbi Golan, or you're interested in more details of how to support a Reform community in Israel, he is going to stick around. He's not in any rush after the program concludes, and so you may approach him and ask him for details about both of these initiatives. No weekend about Reform Judaism and democracy in Israel would be complete without speaking about October 7th, and that is Rabbi Golan Ben-Chorin's topic today. He's going to give us a charge on how to bring positive change to the region, even from our homes here in the diaspora. I know from my previous programs with Rabbi Golan that he is a talented guitar player, and I also know that because of this challenging topic, we can use some hope and inspiration. And so I'm pleased that Rabbi Golan is going to frame his words, which he will deliver from here at the podium, with some music, which he is going to lead from right in front of the bima. And so to speak on the topic October 6th, 7th, and 8th, before, during, and after the war in Gaza, it is my pleasure to once again introduce Rabbi Golan Ben-Chorin.
Shalom to everyone, Boker Tov, good morning, and good to see you all. So I don't know how exactly to take this, but I was taken care of very well with a guitar, but with no strap. So to me, that sort of feels like Israel, right? We have it, but how do we connect? So I thought that was just a good way to start. Oh, say shalom imromah, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru amen. Oh, say shalom imromah. want to say a word before we go to the last part of this song. Oseh shalom bimromav, he who makes peace on high. And I asked this rhetorical question, I'm now going to turn into a real question. Why does God need to make peace on high? Isn't there peace there already? God will make peace for us, but maybe God has to make peace on high. And for me, that teaches us that ideals are wonderful, but once you bring them into the world, they're going to clash not with evil, sometimes it does, but more often it will clash with other values. So on high, there isn't peace because that is the level of ideal existence, but even there, if it was to stay there, I don't know much about there. I know about here. Here, it's not so simple. And even God, or we turn to the power of God in order to balance out those different values. And someone just asked me over the lovely breakfast, and thank you so much, but I did make a mistake. I thought I'd be able to eat there. That didn't happen. So, someone asked about tribalism, right? Is Judaism, is the Israeli reality becoming tribalism? And then someone else mentioned, well, that sounds negative. And I said, well, it's not so simple. Don't we all want our kids and the next generation to marry into the Jewish tribe? Now it becomes more complicated because there is a tribal element which is very strong and positive and reinforces our own identity. But there's a tribalism which excludes others, which of course is very negative. But here as well, make peace on high. How do we take a value of keeping our tradition alive, which is a tribal way of dealing with reality, but not slip into tribalism? How do we make an inclusive reality in our synagogues, in the state of Israel, yet not lose that element of being Jewish? That's where we need God's help to try and work out those dilemmas. By the way, that melody was written in Israel by a group called Navat Tehillah, which is connected to the Renewal Movement. It's the only synagogue in Israel of the Renewal Movement. And to be able to bring modern Israeli melodies abroad. I don't know how many of you are surprised that that's an Israeli melody, because everybody uses it here. But that's where it came from. And on the Friday night, we also sang at the synagogue, right, at Emunah. We sang a Shema Yisrael, which was actually written by an Israeli rock star, right? The melody of that Shema Yisrael was written by Tzvika Pik, who was the bad boy in Israel of the rock music, and happened to create a Shema Yisrael, which has, I think, ignited the imagination around the world with his melodies. So why am I saying this? Again, nothing is simple, okay? And today's comments are going to deal with some very serious and difficult issues. So for those who have been journeying together over this weekend, I hope there was an easy way or easing into this difficult discussion. For those who are joining today for the first time, please know that we didn't try to just land into the difficult and the harsh reality, and we'll have to make up the soft entry another time. Israel is in deep crisis. And I want to name it in a way, again, carefully but truthfully. Messianism is threatening liberal values in Israel. If this continues, the values we hold true as Reformed Jews will at best not exist in Israel, or at worst, will be banned in Israel. I stand behind every word I've just said. I've picked them carefully, and I'd like to take these next few moments to explain what that means and how maybe we can deal as Jews living outside of Israel, how we can assist in making sure this doesn't happen. I want to be both honest and kind. I want to be both truthful and delicate. As an Israeli, the first part is easier than the second part, but I know that I have friends here, and when I say that, not only dear family, but also friends, as in, listen to these words with a friendly ear. Because if we do not say what we believe, we then cannot be surprised that we find ourselves alone. So I'm going to say and share some ideas that might be challenging on some level or all levels. I don't know each of you, and I don't know what you bring to this moment. But I want to say that these words will be spoken by an Israeli who lives in Israel and deals with the reality that I will now share with you every moment of my life. And that's why I want to share it with you. I am not here to convince anyone. In 1991, I was an emissary, a shaliach, for the Reform Youth Movement in Australia. And Amos Oz came to visit us. 1990s was the time when the Jewish Agency was still with the approach which was called Shlilat Hagola, the negativity of diaspora. That was the Jewish Agency's approach, was all Jews need to come and live in Israel, and that's what we're here to do. I never agreed with that. I didn't say that in my interview, but I did say it after I was accepted as a shaliach, as an emissary, and did my work in Australia. But when Amos Oz came, he said, I am not going to tell anyone to do anything. I am here to share my deep passion for the state of Israel, my love for the Israeli society. And if that rubs off on anyone, come and join me. I am here in light of what Amos Oz taught me. Share your passion. Don't tell people what to do or what to think. And if it rubs off, maybe they'll join you. And in light of that, I'm going to share these comments. First of all, I've been mentioning a three-legged, al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed, a three-legged approach to Israel. And it says this, and I will explain in depth today. The first is a biblical directive of the centrality of Israel. The second is a historical necessity for a Jewish homeland. And the third is a prophetic imperative to critique power and seek justice and peace.
And if we use this three-legged approach to the state of Israel, the reality of the state of Israel, which I emphasize because I think many of us still hold the mythological approach to the state of Israel. We lived or know of the miracle of the establishment of the state of Israel. And it was miraculous. And it still is. The establishment of the state of Israel is miraculous and maybe even a miracle. But there's a different energy that one needs in order to sustain a reality of the state of Israel. It is a shift from the energies we need in order to create something new and turn it into something that we can sustain. I think we can all relate on a personal level if we've had the following experience. I know that I fell in love. And I know that that led to a wonderful connection. And I know that without that energy of falling in love, I would never have found my partner. Some of you know her personally. That's not enough to sustain a partnership. We know that we need to shift from falling in love into building a love relationship, sustaining a love relationship. I see some smiles on people's faces. I think you get what I'm talking about. It's true about every creation. It's true about our children, and it's true about the state of Israel. There is some energy that's needed to create something new. There's a mythology to it. There's a wonder to it. There's a brilliance to it. And that is necessary to create the state. But if we stay on that level, it's not the energy we need to sustain a state which takes seriously the challenge of turning our theories in Judaism about living as a Jewish society into reality. So the biblical directive is the beginning of our story, an eternal yearning for the return to Zion, from the Torah all the way through history. I want to tell you something you all know. That yearning was mostly spiritual. It was a thought. It was a dream. It was in our prayers. It's in our liturgy. But how many got up and moved to the land of Israel, let alone to the state of Israel? And that's okay. Because the narrative of the centrality of Israel is not minimized to the moving to the land of Israel. It's connecting our fate with the state. It is seeing the ideal of the land of Israel and the state of Israel as something that pulls us towards the realization of that biblical covenant. It's also an anchor for the network of the Jewish peoplehood. We are blessed by the fact that we are dispersed throughout humanity. If we weren't, Judaism would be poorer for being excluded from world interactions and human interactions that happen in different countries and different societies. But we need an anchor. And the anchor is the land and the state of Israel, because of our narrative from the Bible until today. But that very same covenant in Deuteronomy 20:22, you shall faithfully observe all my laws and all my regulations, lest the land to which I bring you to settle in spews you out. That is what the covenant is about. It's not a promise, this land is yours, God said so. That's like quoting half a quote. and saying that's all there is. The Torah states very clearly that the land is promised to the Jewish people on condition of living up to the covenant. And what does the covenant tell us? To deal with all human beings equally, because everyone was created in the image of God. Easy to say, very difficult to translate into a state and a political system and a judicial system and the government and the police force, right? We have the challenge. How do you make a police force that lives up to Jewish ideals? Right? It's easier to sit and theorize about how that would work. But in Israel, we need to do it. So that's our advantage, and that's our disadvantage and our challenge. So that biblical connection to the centrality of the state of Israel is conditional. Built in to that anchor that creates a network of Jewish people around the world is living up to a moral and ethical way of leading a state. Which brings us to the second one, historical necessity for the Jewish people. This is very important to say that alongside the flourishing of the Jewish people in the diaspora, we have experienced systematic, lethal persecution. But the first part of the story is also important, alongside the flourishing in the diaspora. There was over 1,500 years the Jews lived under Muslim rule, not as equals. Jews had to pay a tax. But once that tax was paid, they were seen as having rights within society, under Islamic rule. This is my dear friend, the Emir Muhammad Sharif, the head of the Ahmadiyyan community in Israel. The Ahmadiyyans are a tiny sect of Islam. I tricked some of you into answering my question. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. How many Jews are there in the world? So I'm not going to trick you into answering that one, because then we all agreed that there's no way of knowing the answer because we don't know how to define who is a Jew, right? But let's say, for argument's sake, there are about 15 million Jews in the entire world. The Ahmadiyyans are a tiny sect of Islam, most probably around 17 or 18 million of them in the world. Okay? So a tiny sect in Islam is larger than the entire Jewish people, yet most of us haven't heard of them. And the Ahmadiyyans have a motto, love for all, harm to none. That is their Islamic motto. So there's ways of flourishing in relationship to other people, but there's a necessity for a safe haven for Jews. If that safe haven is the only explanation for why we need a state of Israel, I say that's a very weak argument. But if it's part of a three-legged understanding, that we have a narrative that gives us the right to develop a claim on the land of Israel, and I say that carefully, it gives us a right for a claim. It doesn't say it's ours, but it's a beginning to say for thousands of years our people have yearned for, and 20% of Jewish history have also realized that yearning as Jewish independence in the land of Israel. It gives us a beginning, a narrative which says we have a connection and we have a claim. The historical necessity says we have a need for Israel. We also have another need to realize these concepts of Judaism. They can only be realized fully when we have full responsibility for what we do as Jews in a state, which can only happen in an independent Jewish state. But there's a need and a right for the state and the land of Israel. Now comes the third leg, the prophetic imperative. The prophets taught us that their role was to critique the king and to stand up to society and to the priests and power and say to them, "You are corrupt." It's interesting how the Torah knew that once there's a king and priests, we'll also need prophets, right? But that's not a joke, that's for real, because when we try to realize these concepts of our Jewish tradition about running a society and a state, there will be power involved. And once there's power involved, you have to have a balance to that power. And this is what's being threatened deeply by the situation in Israel. And that's how I opened my remarks about messianism. And I'll explain that in a minute. I first want to finish the model by saying, what is this prophetic imperative? It's not a grandstanding within a theoretical framework. It's a charge for each one of us to look at the state of Israel and say, what is working and what is not? Simple to say, hard to do. Because for some of us, Israel is still that mythological entity that saved the Jewish people. I'm not taking away from that for a moment. I'm just saying life is more complicated than that. Critiquing and criticizing a democratic government in Israel goes hand in hand with the biblical directive, the necessity which was taught to us in history, and we don't need to choose between the two. We can dearly support the idea, the concept of the state of Israel, and at the same time hold our critical minds that we use daily, or else we wouldn't be a part of a Reform congregation. That's part of Reform thinking. Is about, it's my responsibility. I need to think this thing through. It's not enough that my rabbi tells me so. In Israel, people don't understand. They come to me with rabbis' questions. They're used to the Orthodox world. They come with a question, they leave with an answer. They come to me with a question, they leave with many more questions. What have I helped them? But I have. Don't give up on holding the tension of those two elements. Complete support for the narrative and the historical necessity. At the same time, hold on to the prophetic imperative of critiquing power. And that tension might be complicated for you. It is devastating for me because I live that reality. There's never a calm moment. That's an understatement about Israel in general. Right? There are more international reporters per square, I was going to say kilometer, but we don't use that here, mile, in Israel than anywhere else in the world. Not the United Nations, not the Vatican. They're sort of important places in the world, right? Or Washington, you name it. Nope. The most international reporters per square mile in the world are in Israel. Why? Well, like I said, we are a small people, but we make a lot of noise. I was in China in 1991. There weren't many non-Chinese in China in 1991. I was backpacking. And in the middle of a stormy night, I went into a guest house, and there were people speaking English. For the first time, I'd heard English in weeks in China. And in came this teacher, Sifu. Everybody stood up for him. In China, stormy night, he opens his mouth and he's speaking Oxfordian English. And he says to me, "Oh, I understand you're Jewish. I said, yes. He said, I have a question. I said, yes. He said, why is there anti-Semitism in the world? I was there with my backpack, with dirty shoes, and that's what he had to ask. Well, it was a very interesting conversation. He'd never met a Jew before in his life, nor had anyone in the room who he was teaching English. But we make a lot of noise. Sometimes it's called a light unto the nations, and we feel it as a blessing. And sometimes it's a huge burden. And when I wrap the bar mitzvah boys and girls in my synagogue in Tivon in the talit for the first time when they come up to read Torah, I say to them, in a moment you will feel the weight of Jewish tradition on your shoulders. Sometimes it will feel light, and it will be like wings with which to soar. And sometimes this very talit will feel like tons of weight on your shoulders. That's what it means to be Jewish. And that's what it means to deal with the land of Israel in its context today as the state of Israel. What's happened in Israel? Let's go back to 2020, and here I have to read because I can't remember dates, numbers, so anyone who gave me their phone number, forget about it. So here we go. Back to 2020, political crisis and elections. Now we're starting 2020. We're going back 5 years. Right? I said to you, in Israel, the pace of change is so great that you can never keep up with the news. Right? What happens in Israel in a day happens in weeks or not months other places in the world. Here's what happened from 2020. Political crisis and elections, March 2020. Third election in less than a year with political deadlock continuing. May 2020, Netanyahu sworn in for the 5th term in rotation government with Benny Gantz, and COVID-19 pandemics breaks out. The Abraham Accord started in August through September 2020 with historic Abraham Accord signed, normalizing relations with the UAE and Bahrain. And December 2020, Morocco and Sudan also join in, and still there's COVID. December 20, Netanyahu becomes the first sitting prime minister, publicly known to receive the COVID vaccine. Large-scale protests erupt against Netanyahu over corruption trial and pandemic management. And we're just in 2020, and now in December, government coalition collapse after failing to pass budget by the deadline. Now we're in 2021. I hope you're a little tired. 4th election and government change, March 2021. 2 years in, Netanyahu wins the elections again, and COVID continues. By March 2021, Israel became the country with the highest vaccinated population per capita against COVID-19. So good things and bad things and things are happening all the time. May 2021, after tensions escalated in Jerusalem, Hamas fired rockets from Gaza, prompting Netanyahu to initiate an 11-day military operation. By June of 2021, Bennett-Lapid coalition sworn in. There's a new government, ending Netanyahu's 12-year tenure as prime minister, and the first government to include an independent Arab-Israeli party in the coalition. Wow, we've made it to 2022. In June, Bennett-Lapid government announces dissolution after legislative defeats. And in November 2022, 5th election held, and Netanyahu's right-wing bloc wins, and he's back in. December 2022, Netanyahu sworn in for the 6th time as prime minister with hardline coalition, and we're up to 2023. I can't see you because I don't have my glasses on, so I don't know if I've lost you or you're understanding what I'm saying. I could keep going. You know what? I won't. What I will do, though, I will say all this brings us to October 6th. Yes, there were days before October 7th. And as human beings do, we tend to forget that. There's a famous experiment that frogs are put into water, and slowly the temperature of the water is turned up and they don't jump out. You've heard of this? It's not true. Really. There was a scientist, unfortunately I don't remember his name, I need to get that for you, but you can Google it and find him easily, who actually went back and saw and checked if this is true, and he said, no, Frogs will quickly jump out when it gets too hot. But we keep telling the story because we don't jump out when the water is slowly heated up. Interesting. It's harder for us to talk about ourselves than about frogs. October 6th found Israel in deep existential crisis even before the next deep existential crisis. The tensions within society were so large. The gap between understanding someone's ideas and saying this is your identity and this is who you are collapsed. And that's when you get people demonizing the other for who they are, not for what they believe. And that was the situation in October 6th. There was so much tension in the country. The judicial overhaul or the change of government system had brought people into the streets. And there was a deep sense of an emerging battle within Israeli society. The tensions were that high. October 7th. It's ironic that the state of Israel, which, as we learned before, is a historical necessity, was the site of the worst annihilation of Jews since the Holocaust. And I use the word annihilation of Jews because it's one that I don't like and I don't believe in. But I said it to you because I hope you felt when I said those words what many Israelis felt. Israelis felt that the Holocaust reached Israel. I personally think that's not true. I also think it's very problematic to name it in such a way and to frame it in such a way, because between what happened in the Holocaust and what happened in Israel, there are huge differences. But I wasn't making a claim on truth. I was trying to impress upon you how Israelis felt. By the way, national trauma like that, in Jewish psyche, that's what we have. We have the Holocaust to relate to. So it's not, it's very understandable why we use that imagery. Even though I don't think it is true in the sense of the context and the actions and the results. But definitely on the psychological level, that's what people in Israel felt. The Holocaust hit us here in Israel. On that very same day, all government institutions disappeared. All government institutions, state institutions, disappeared on October 7th. What am I talking about? I see some perplexed faces. The army was not there to defend Jewish settlements and cities and kibbutzim. Settlements not in the term of the West Bank use of it, but kibbutzim, moshavim. The army was not there. The police were not there. Magen David Adom was not there. Local government was not there. That is the deep existential threat we felt on October 7th, which is a second layer to the threat we felt on October 6th. Holding this tension can drive one crazy. The fact that Israeli society didn't dissolve into chaos on that day is a sign of the strength of the society and the weakness of its government. Can we critique the government? Isn't that critiquing the Jewish people? Isn't that saying we have no right? No, it's not. Israel is no longer the mythic reality that we knew. It is a reality of concrete democratic systems. We have to understand this. Critiquing Israel is not anti-Semitism. It can be, but it's not by definition. We can critique Israel, other people can critique Israel, and yes, anti-Semitism is awful. And anyone who hides their anti-Semitism behind anti-Israeli concepts and criticism is falling out twice with what it means to be a human being. One is by lying, and second, by holding these anti-Semitic ideas of Jews as evil. But let's not misunderstand the fact that we can critique Israel and its government without being anti-Semitic. I do it daily. Some of you might say I'm anti-Semitic. No. Not only am I not anti-Semitic, I'm pro-Zionist. What does Zionism mean? It's very clear in the Declaration of Independence. I've mentioned this before over the weekend. The only mention of our Jewish sources in the Declaration of Independence, in Israel's Declaration of Independence, is that prophetic message and the imperative in light of the prophets of Israel. That's in our declaration. So to be Zionist means to critique Zionist power, because that's what the prophets always did, from a deep sense of loving and care. We have to hold that tension together. And the fact that the Israeli society didn't crash into a state of chaos on October 7th proves the resilience of the Israeli society. Who stepped in? Individuals. Who stepped in? People who said, it's my responsibility. I will go and save as many as I can. Druze drivers of buses who went back into the Nova to pick up those who were not slaughtered and drive them out. Thousands of Israelis, Jews, Muslims, Christian Israelis who started to donate, who started to drive around the country to bring things to people who needed them. The security was left up to individuals who took responsibility and acted. The medical services was left up to people who said, I can save someone else, a soul. I will go and do it. October 7th was proof of how much strength we have as a people living in a state whose institutions disappeared on the most challenging day of our history. Sort of halfway through my remarks, and we have 13 minutes left if I'm right. And I wanted to open up to some questions, so I'm trying to think, how can I sort of concise something of this last part? And I'll tell you about October 8th. So October 8th is the continuation of that resilience. But it also comes with a very, very deep price. In Israel today, there are close to 8 million people. There were over 1,300 people slaughtered on the attack perpetrated by Hamas on that very same day. There were hostages that were slaughtered. There were people who then lost their lives in the war. The war, in my view, was a just war conducted by an unjust government. I think there was a need and a necessity. I served in the Israeli army. My wife served in the Israeli army. Our kids served, and up to 6 months ago was still serving. Our son was in Gaza, fighting in the war. There's a necessity for strength in the Middle East and power. But if we lose sight of the prophetic vision, that very same IDF can turn into a tool of destruction. And I say it as one who served in the IDF, with our son and daughter both volunteering for combat service in the Israeli armed forces. My father served in the Israeli army. My grandparents protected Jerusalem with guns they didn't know how to use. I know of the need to protect our people in the state of Israel. I am very much aware of the fact that the IDF can be used as a tool for evil. We can't let it get there. This is the state of the crisis we are in Israel. There are powers and forces in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel, and the government of Israel who want to use what is necessary to protect us in order to advance a messianic vision of Israel. What does that mean? There are elements in Israel and the Jewish society who see the establishment of the state of Israel as God's will on earth, and that we need to bring it to fruition to make Israel free of any non-Jew. This is the same Israel we love. This is the same Israel we cherish. If you're feeling your heart being torn, that's good. Because if not, you're staying blind to one of the two, either to the love of Israel or to the critique of a democratically elected government of that very real state of Israel that has called for the annihilation of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Ministers within our government have made those statements publicly. How do we live with our heart being torn apart? Many people can't hold that tension and say, I will distance myself from Israel. I can deal no more. It's painful, but I can understand. If we can't understand, we won't even find a way to bring those people back. if all we do is criticize them, we don't offer them a path back in to caring deeply about Israel. And those who say, I can't hold this tension, I will not critique Israel, you are leaving me in Israel alone. I need your partnership. I need people, Jewish people, who can hold the tension and say, we believe in what Israel can and should be. The vision of Israel as a Jewish state which does not exclude any non-Jews. Is there a model for this in the world? No. Do we have to create it? Yes. If not, we either go the messianic route of clearing out any non-Jews from Israel, or divest ourselves from any contact with our biblical and historical roots in Israel. I'm asking you to do a very hard thing. It's complicated. But that's why we said, Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. We need God's help to reconcile and live. It's not reconcile, sorry. We need to navigate the tension. And we need help with that, to do it here on earth. Should we take some questions?
Well, first of all, thank you to Rabbi Golan Ben-Chorin. We have really time for only maybe 3 questions. It's not fair, but 3 is better than none. And you know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're looking for questions and not comments, lectures, stories, wisdom imparted by you, because the wisdom today is imparted by Rabbi Golan. And even your question, please get right to the question so that he has more time to answer it. Amanda Eastman, after I call on you, will give you the microphone, so don't start asking until the microphone is in your hand, because we want the folks on live stream to hear the question also. Okay, who's got a...
And I'll just add
Yes.
that I'm willing to stay afterwards. I'm in no rush to
thank
celebrate any
goodness.
birthdays.
Okay.
So I'll stay here until...
Okay, questions. All right. Yes, wait for the microphone to come to you. Start by telling us your name and your congregation.
My name is Bonnie Benowitz from Adas Samuno. What would be the most practical, effective step that American Reform Jews could take at this point
Okay.
to help?
Wonderful. I'll take a question and answer. It'll keep my answers short, because if you put them all together, I'll talk forever. So, practical, thank you. That's a wonderful point. One is hold the tension. That's very practical, and not give up to an either-or kind of approach. And then talk about it. Tell people that there is an option to deeply, dearly love and connect to the ideal of Israel and critique its power. That's number 1. Number 2, we can support, we being all of you, support those in Israel who are trying to work for this ideal today, and that's us, the Reformed Jews in Israel. Become an overseas member of a Reformed congregation. And those of you who want to know more about how to do that with the congregation that I serve in Tivon, come up to me afterwards, as some of you have already done, and give me a card or your name written down with an email, and I will make sure that the coordinator of our overseas membership will send out and invite you in for a dialogue. It doesn't stop by just sending in the $120 donation. It begins a relationship where you have Israeli Reformed Jews to talk to, and we share our values together. And I think number 3, I chose education as my route. Education is slow, long-term change. That's the definition of education. Politics is fast, immediate power, hopefully that changes to the good. Get involved in the politics of Israel. There are ways we can support those who believe in the values we hold true as liberal Jews. They are working in Israel. We can support them. You've now had the spiritual, which is the connection to the congregation, the educational, which will come along with that, and the political. And most importantly, stand up and say, I hold the tension, and yes, this can be done. When we give that example, we will have some of the people we've lost come back to us and say, now I can deal with Israel.
Yes, let's go to Hildy Dillon over here. We'll pass the microphone down to Hildy.
First of all, thank you. Incredible food for thought. My question is, within the United States, the different ways of practicing Judaism in the different communities, even here in our town of Teaneck, we have ultra-Orthodox, New Orthodox, Conservative, Reform. In Israel, how are you working with this education in an interfaith perspective to bring your thoughts and your vision to the other groups that are Jews in Israel that don't agree? Are there conversations? Are they productive? Or is it still very difficult to have those conversations?
Thank you for the question. It was interesting. You said interfaith relations about streams of Judaism, and what I think you meant was intra-faith, which is sometimes much harder than interfaith, right? I just finished a 3-day conference, an international conference for the Peace Project in Tbilisi, Georgia, where a synagogue, a mosque, a church, and a Buddhist temple, all under one roof in separate rooms, exists, and I happen to have the honor of being the founding rabbi of that community. And believe me, it was much easier than talking to the ultra-Orthodox in Israel. So what can we do? You know, it's even more difficult than that, because we walk a very thin line. As Reformed Jews, we believe in pluralism, and pluralism says that there should be space for multiple voices, and also that there's power and advantage of interaction between different voices. By the way, that's my doctoral thesis. I saved you 250 pages. You now know what I wrote there. So, in pluralism, in a synagogue, what can we do? I have a challenge as a rabbi of a congregation. I know that I cannot speak on political parties in my sermons or in my teachings. But if I shy away from talking about politics, I'm not living up to my necessity as a rabbi, because Judaism teaches politics. Politics is about how to lead society. Open the Torah. It's full of instructions about how to lead society. So by definition, Judaism, especially Reformed Judaism, is political. But how do we walk the line of political but not political party? These elections coming up now in Israel, if they happen, you can quote me on that, because we will see if I'm right or wrong. I'll be so happy either way, right? If I'm wrong, I can say, I told you so. And if I'm right, I'll tell you I told you so. If I'm wrong that there will be elections, I say, oh, thank God, I was wrong. So either way, I'm fine. I hope this is being recorded. So if there are elections, these are the most critical elections of the state of Israel in its history, because we will now see what people want. And believe me, it's not about the leaders. It's about the people. If most of the people want this, and it shows up in a free election, then we'll know what direction Israeli society is going in. By the way, there's this thing about the elections now. Well, let's all the Arab voices come together and make one list. I don't know if you've heard, those of you who follow, those of you who don't follow, don't worry, it's a footnote, but that's ridiculous. Why? It's like saying, why don't all the Jewish parties come together as one? And then you say, oh, right, on the Jewish side, you have Otzma Yehudit, which is Kahana in the Knesset, and you have Meretz, which is now dissolved and is part of the Democratic Party, right? And you say, why don't all the Jews come together? And it's easy for us to say, why don't the Arabs come together? And then we realize how ridiculous that is because all the Jews can't come together. But they're a minority. So what? Right? We're a minority as Jews around the world. You have something to teach us. We in Israel, the Jews, have forgotten what it means to be a minority and the sensitivities that come with that. We need you to remind us of that. Right? Its power has gone to our heads in Israel. What do I do in my congregation? I'm not going to sit idly by and let these elections happen. But I can't tell anyone what to vote for. Right? Because it's against my own ethical code as a rabbi of a pluralist congregation. I've come up with a solution. So we're going to hold a series of workshops in the congregation about being observers, poll observers, is that how it's called here? Yeah, would that make sense? Right, about we will train people in the synagogue to be poll observers and to make sure we have an election that lives up to our Jewish ideals. And anyone becoming a poll observer has to do it through a political party. I'm not going to sign up anyone in the synagogue. I'm going to teach them why this is important, how they can make sure that it's a clean and legal voting system, right? Elections, which we all want, and then each one goes home and signs up from his own political party, right? So walking that line is difficult within Reform Judaism, let alone speaking to other groups. The good news is there are groups that are doing it. I teach an online Zoom course for the past 5 years with a congregation in Boston. And I bring people once a month onto Zoom from Israel that people you'd never know existed. And one of the last ones was Moishi. Moishi is an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva bochel. He's 25 years old and he lives in Beitar Eilit. And he talked to us. And at first I thought the subject was going to be why the ultra-Orthodox won't serve in the Israeli army. And I realized my bias. I realized that I was wrong. That's not what we need to do. We need to get to know Moishi. Then maybe we can have a conversation about how he sees serving in the army. What does it mean from his background to serve in the army? What do people want? Is there tension there? So by doing exactly what you said, I learned a very important lesson. For one who deals with inter and intra-faith dialogue all the time, I also fall into the trap of equating someone's stance on something with who he is. I needed to get to know him. It's not easy. Very few places are still... I thought that was the end. Did I miss that point? Okay, that's the end.
Okay. Okay, so in the spirit of our collaboration, we've had one question from Adas Muna, one question from Temple Emeth. We'll take our final question from a member of Temple's, a member or a clergy person of Temple Sinai. If there is one.
Members.
Okay.
You guys want to raise your hand?
Okay, okay, so look, there's no rule. There has to be a question, but
Well, of course there's one.
okay. Rabbi Milstein.
First of all, I just have to say thank you to you, Golan. I mean, just really incredible your talk here today and over the whole weekend, and to Rabbi Serbiu and Rabbi Schwartz and the other congregations for making this such a terrific weekend. One thing that you mentioned is that, and I apologize, this is a statement, not a question initially. You mentioned getting involved politically in Israel. We actually happen to have Yair Golan, who is the head of the Democracy Party, coming to Temple Sinai a week from Thursday. That's February 26th. He's in the New York area. we have connections with the local Israeli community, activists who are bringing him in. We will get publicity to you through your congregations. My question really involves the how you're understanding messianism here, and you specified the messianism as being about getting rid of the Arabs from the society. Isn't the messianism fundamentally about controlling all of the historic land of Israel, and meaning fundamentally about annexing the West Bank right now, and that the biggest danger for Israel is there in terms of that messianic situation and the vast number of Palestinians living on the West Bank, and how that is happening, and what it's doing, what people are doing there in terms of violence and trying to take control with settlements and those aspects.
Thank you. Messianism runs through so many of the elements of the reality of the politics and what's happening on the ground in Israel today. And so many different parts of this messianism are evil. So people, Jews, with big kippot and tzitzit hanging out. I was going to tell a joke, but I don't think it's time to tell the joke. Someone wanted it. Afterwards, I'll tell you the joke. So, and with tefillin, beating up Palestinians, beating up peace workers. What can I say? That we wished we'd never see such a thing, that it's anathema to Judaism. I mean, what can one say? And a dear friend, Rabbi Asherman, who is out there, just protecting these people, and amazing. That's very, very difficult. It's also something that you can see pictures of, which makes it today prevalent in the discourse. I don't think that's the most dangerous part of messianism. Messianism, in the case in Israel, means that there are people who adhere to their rabbis, who have a vision of the temple being rebuilt on the Temple Mount, of the law of Torah in the orthodox sense of the word being the law of the land. There are ministers in the Israeli government who are walking around with a pin of a noose. Noose, is that how we call it? A hangman's noose. Hangman's noose. Because they are pushing for the death penalty for Arab terrorism, not Jewish terrorism, and not terrorism, Arab terrorism. There are people making their way into the armed services, into the secret services, into the police, who adhere to their rabbis above the law of the land. You can't take pictures of this, so we're not aware of it. And it doesn't mean that what's happening in the West Bank is not atrocious, and I don't have the vocabulary to say what I feel about what I described to you of Jews perpetrating this kind of terrorism on Palestinians, on Bedouins. But the danger is systematic. And it appears in various aspects of society. So much so that there are civilians who feel they have the right to harass other civilians just because they criticize the government. We are in crisis. Unfortunately, the United States is in crisis too. Not great timing. But one thing we can do is to stand up and say, we hold the tension. We will work for the betterment of the state of Israel. We will support Reform Jews who are making that struggle day in and day out. And the good news, Israelis are unstoppably optimistic. Thank you.
Well, I had a feeling that we'd be talking about crisis and tension and a lot of uncomfortable topics, and I thought that as important as it is to speak about these things, it is important to leave us with a little sense of uplift and inspiration. And so for that reason, I've asked Rabbi Golan Ben-Chorin to conclude his remarks today with a song. You're still going to do a closing song, right? Okay. And as he's picking up his guitar, I'll just say that I think we kept the cookies and the coffee in the social hall. If you'd like to go back there and continue the conversation with Rabbi Golan or with each other, you are welcome to do that. I told some people we were going to finish at noon, so we're obviously past that very aspirational time frame. So you're welcome to leave, of course, when it's over. As you heard, we have a new sound system here. We're going to continue tweaking the sound system, doing training on the sound system. So whether it's in the social hall or down the hallway, I'm going to ask you to not stay in the sanctuary because we need to keep tweaking our sound system so it sounds perfect when we use it again on Friday night. Rabbi Golan.
So that was a Shechianu moment. I was the first to use the new sound system. From now on to be known as, you decide what it's known as. Okay. I wanted to end with a song of hope, even though there's a melancholy sort of tune to it, because I think we have to hold both of those true. And it says, Shamati tfilatech, I heard your prayer. Ra'iti dim'atech, I saw your tear. Hineni rofe lach, I will heal you. Shamati tfilatech, o ra'iti dim'atech, הנני רופא לך, רופא לך. שמעתי תפילתך, או ראיתי דמעתך, הנני רופא לך, רופא לך. ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון, שלום על כל העולמות, ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון, שלום על כל העולמות. ראיתי, שמעתי תפילתך, או ראיתי דמעתך, הנני רופא לך, רופא לך. שמעתי תפילתך, או ראיתי דמעתך, הנני רופא לך, רופא לך. May we all feel the healing of gathering together to encourage us to hold tension and to bring peace into the world. Thank you.
This concludes our Scholar in Residence weekend with our 3 congregations. I thank you so much for coming today, and may we go forward in peace. Shalom. Thank you.